Hello, this is Gary Reinhardt from Declan Radio here with Heart to Heart with Gary Reinhardt. I'm here with the Weaver family. I have Bill Weaver, third generation sugar maker. Aaron Weaver, his son, fourth generation sugar maker of Weaver Sugar Bush. And I have Ann Weaver, the town historian of Lake Pleasant. How are you all doing tonight?
Great. Hey,
Good. As we all know, the Adirondacks and maple syrup go together very well. What would the history be of the Adirondacks and maple syrup?
Well, the history goes back to possibly over 1,000 years ago when the native tribes are well known for, they used to tap the maple trees and they would drink the sap from the trees as nourishment. And this would be done actually throughout the year. That's where it all began. Then by the 1900s, when the Dutch came over, the Iroquois nation, as well as other tribes, taught the Dutch about this process of taking sap from out of the tree. And the Dutch themselves, they're like, well, wait a minute, we can boil this down and make sugar out of this sap. And that's how it all began. Now, for the Adirondacks, when the first settlers started from Europe started moving up into the Adirondacks, they learned from the Iroquois nation in the Mohawk Valley. They just brought along with them.
Excellent. Because I know a lot of people who think of maple syrup might think more Vermont in that area, but we have a very rich history of making maple syrup. How long have the Weavers themselves, or you guys, been making maple syrup?
Oh my goodness.
Before 1916.
Oh no, way before that.
Well, up here in Lake Pleasant, Peter Weaver, who was William's grandfather, came up here in the 1880s. And he and his son started sugaring before 1916. In 1916, they built the sugar house that is there now. And they bought a 3-foot by 6-foot evaporator to start making the maple syrup.
It's interesting to know that we thought that our grandfather made a lot of maple syrup, but that's not true. He made more maple sugar, which is boiling the syrup down farther, and he sold it in a store. It was actually more popular back then because anybody could make maple syrup themselves. But making the maple sugar was actually where he could make most of his money.
Was that store called Store?
No, the store he had in his own house,
Which was
in
down,
the basement,
Yeah.
the Mountain
View House.
Mountain View House.
As for the Weaver family themselves, the Weavers or the Weavers go way back to New York colony back in 1712. And we were with the German Palatines from the Schoharie Valley to the Mohawk Valley. And with them, we had learned from the Iroquois nation on how to gather sap. And we've been boiling it down to maple sugar until the recent years, which we did it into maple syrup. And the reason for that was sugar was very expensive back then. And therefore, when you wanted to cook with sugar, you would use whatever resources you had available. It wasn't a business process, it was just for personal use. By the time of the 1700s, during the American Revolution, there was this thing that was called the Sugar Act.
Yes.
And there was a lot of protest of buying sugar from the British Empire. As a result, the people in the Mohawk Valley, including the Weavers, made maple sugar and sold it to Albany and all the way down to New York City. It was actually one of the few first times that maple sugar was recorded as being a business outside their family realms.
Now, is there a difference between maple sugar and like sugar cane?
Well, sugar cane is from a plant. Well, maple sugar is from the sap from a tree.
Okay.
So-
And does it have like a different taste, would you say, between the two?
Oh, definitely. I would say the maple sugar is, I mean, they're both sweet, but it's very hard to explain for those who have never tasted maple sugar how different it is. But it is of course, it has a woody flavor to it because it's from trees. But it is a very sweet woody flavor.
It's good.
It's very good. Absolutely. In fact, some people would recommend maple sugar over regular sugar because of its natural richness and taste, and it's even considered better for you.
Yes.
Yep.
More natural. So, well, you can grow your own maple trees, but usually most sugar bushes have been there. Well, sugarcane, you can grow. You could start your own sugarcane company and grow the plants.
Which,
So,
yeah, that's very true. A lot of people don't realize this, but if you buy real maple syrup from a store, it probably came from a bush and not a farm. And some people are like, well, what's the difference? A farm is where you plant the products that you harvest. A bush is when you harvest from the wilderness that's wild. And a lot of times maple sugar or maple syrup is from wild maple trees. And they aren't farmed or planted by the farmers themselves.
Yeah, that was actually a question I was going to touch on. Is what is the difference between the maple syrup you buy in the store, like Aunt Jemima's and whatnot, and then the stuff that we've been accustomed to, like the Weavers, the McCombs, the real stuff. I mean, I know not everyone who's listening has tasted real maple syrup, and it is a crime that you have not. Because I am definitely a maple syrup fanatic. The darker the amber, the better for me.
Yeah.
so are we. The darker it is, the better.
Yeah.
Well, the syrup in the store, like Aunt Jemima's and so forth, is made from either carrot syrup
corn syrup.
or corn syrup
Yeah.
or refined sugar.
Yes.
Well, real maple syrup is boiled in the evaporators from the trees, the sap from the trees themselves.
Also, the fake maple syrup has flavoring in it.
Yes.
And what is really different between the two is that maple syrup, the real stuff, is pure. That's the only recipe that the ingredients that you'll find on the bottle is maple sugar. When you look in the other bottles that are factory made, there is like a list of
And you wrote a thesis on how big those are.
yeah.
Much additive.
Yeah. Now, when you make other products other than syrup, and I'm talking about candy, the brittle, all that stuff that rots your teeth out, is that all maple sugar made into the candies?
Well, maple candy itself is actually maple sap boiled in a longer process. The longer the maple sap is boiled, the more it becomes into a solid product. You probably have learned in school, like water has a gas, a liquid, and a solid. Well, so does sap. Sap has a gas, a liquid, and a solid. And
It
the sugar.
depends on how long you boil it.
How long you
and
boil
then,
it.
And most of the maple sugar is poured into molds, and it hardens in the mold.
Right, and that's and that will be explained better when we talk about the process of it.
Yeah, let's talk about the process. I've been up to the sugar house, I think once, and I got a quick tour of what was going on, but it was like the backside of the season. But it was still a very impressive setup. How would you describe the process from tree to bottle?
Oh, sure. Well, I'm going to refer to like backyard. It's called backyard making maple syrup. Anybody could do it. We sell it, and so we have to make sure that things are, done in such a way that we could actually sell it. But let's say you're going to do your own backyard, and you said, I just want to tap a tree and see what happens. Well, the first thing you got to do is, it's this time of year, you got to have cold nights and warm days. And when that starts happening in the spring of the year, then you would put a hole into a tree and put a spout into it and hang a bucket on it. And once you do that, before long you start getting sap, and that's what it's called, the stuff that comes out of a maple tree. It's called sap. And once that sap is collected, then you have to have a way of getting the water out of it so that it starts turning into your syrup. And so what you have to do is to come up with a way, and there's many ways of doing that. And once you heat that, it starts getting thicker and darker, and you check your temperature, and you set your temperature. You got to be, if I figure out like boiling water, it's got to be boiling, and before long it starts getting sweeter. And there are many ways that people do it. You can get very technical, or you can just, if you're doing it in your backyard, we have to be technical because we sell it, but you could just taste it, or have put a spoon up or something up, and it starts thickening on it. And at that point, then you want to put it into a can, and you can put it on your pancakes.
Mm-hmm. That's definitely my favorite way to do it. So when I go to the farm and I see the loads of blue tubing, and I even see it sometimes when I go from FM towards Amsterdam, there's just tons of tubing. Mm-hmm. That would be kind of the bucket, right, where it all goes downhill into probably a collector of some sort.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. We have changed over to tubing. Many people have at this time. It's so much easier. The buckets are good, but the tubing gives you a lot of great advantages. Number one is when it rains out, you can get water that's in your buckets. Also, if you tap early and you have buckets, they can actually dry out because the air can get to them. But if you have the tubing, they'll stay a lot longer. And also, the tubing, you can have it so it runs downhill, or it can actually run right into your sugar house, so you don't have to gather it. There's a lot of benefits to the tubing.
Some people even, like people who just do it as a hobby. I have a friend down in Amsterdam, and he actually has the tubes go into a closed-in bucket. Mm-hmm. And that way the insects won't get in, mm-hmm. and he can just take it right to his kitchen or wherever he does it, and just starts boiling the sap down to syrup.
I would recommend not to boil it in your kitchen.
No.
Because all the evaporated water goes to your ceiling and your walls, and if you have wallpapering, you'll see the wallpapering will start coming off. So it's better to boil it outside.
Is this a personal experience?
Well, different friends I have.
Different friends.
Yes.
Excellent. So you get the sap to the sugar house, and then I've seen you have the big cauldron where I assume you put the water. You have the water to boil it, and then you put the syrup in.
Yes.
To boil it out.
Yes.
And I'll tell you, when I was in there, it was probably the end of the winter, but it was still pretty chilly out. 5 minutes in, I had to take my coat off. I was sweating. And I believe it was your brother Peter was adding wood to this fire to keep it hot and boiling.
I'm still trying to convince the family to turn it into a sauna during the summertime. But what that big cauldron is called, it's called an evaporator.
Yes. Some of the more modern evaporators, sugar houses, are actually, you would have to have a stove to stay warm because they actually capture everything. The steam goes is captured, and it's actually cold in the sugar bush, the house. But ours, we still have the open. We are very historical. Our family is, and we enjoy stepping back in time. And so, when you walk into the sugar bush, you have that wonderful smell, and when you open that door, it's very steamy at times. Other times, it's not so much, but it is quite warm in there.
Oh, yes. And so you mentioned that although you do use, I guess it would be newer techniques like the tubing, in other aspects you also like to harken back to more of the simpler, older methods.
Yeah, because on the hearth, if you look in front of our evaporator, there's a date that says 1916, and that was our grandfather built that. And so we try to keep, when you walk in, as much as we can, we try to keep it so that you have a sense of the history. But we do have to, because of rules and regulations, we do have to do some things. But for the most part, we have the pictures on the wall and the history of the family, and it's really unique. It's really nice. People enjoy it.
There's still one section of the sugar bush that we use buckets.
Correct. About 50 buckets.
Yep.
We want to keep the family involved. This is a family business, and we've done it for many, many years. And with today's technology, once you're all tapped and everything's running in, just a couple people could actually do the whole thing. But by having the buckets, you have a certain time of day that that you come over and you start gathering in, and then you meet at the sugar house. You linger there for a while and talk and enjoy each other. It's a wonderful time.
And I still love using the yoke that I put on my shoulder to carry both buckets up and down the mountain. It's I just brings, like Dad says, it brings you back in time, like the way that your ancestors did it, and you actually become part of the process of gathering that sap.
Yeah, I've seen Facebook photos where you have your thick blue coat with the buttons and you're hauling it down the hill. Have regulations gotten in the way of making maple syrup, or are they not that stingent? Or
Well, there's always going to be regulations, and there's always things that are changing in our world. A lot of that is because of technology. At one time, we measured one way. Now we've measured billions, when we take liquid and like that. And so, yes, there's always going to be changes. But with those changes, you can do them in such a way. Everything needs to be very clean, very pure. Filtering is very, very important. It doesn't make that much difference if you're just doing it yourself. But when you sell something, you have to realize, that you have to do it in such a way that the cleanliness is very important.
Mm-hmm. But as for the process, it would be very foolish to make regulations on certain things because it is not an exact science.
Mm-hmm.
You're totally relying on nature when it comes to making maple syrup.
all right, speaking of nature, do you plan ahead of time on what trees to tap, or is this something you can do to a tree every year?
That's a good question. First of all, you want your trees to last. For some of our trees that we have in the bush, my grandfather tapped. These are huge trees, huge maple trees. And so you have to respect that tree. And so what you do is when you tap it, you have to look at that tree over and make sure that you respect that tree and that you tap it in such a way that you won't damage the tree, because remember, the holes grow right back over as time goes on, and so it doesn't hurt the tree as long as you are careful with it, like everything. And you have to plan ahead as far as how many taps per tree. We go by the size. Usually if you can hug a tree, put your arms around a tree, that's 2 taps. If it's less than that, you need 1 tap. If it's huge, huge tree, then you can get 3 taps. Years ago, when my grandfather tapped, they did a lot more holes into it. There'd usually be 2 spiles per bucket, and now even the size of the hole is very small compared to what my grandfather did. So they have done a lot of improvements, a lot of studies through the years, finding out the yield per size of hole, and they are always trying to make things better.
Yeah, the Native Americans were far more rough with those trees than we were. They would actually cut in a triangular, what do you call it? They would just cut it slash. They would cut a slash, and they just put a stick in, like a stick right in there, and let the sap flow out just like that. And yeah, we're actually far more respectful than the ancient natives were with those trees.
So you mentioned that even though you're tapping these trees, taking their sap out, that doesn't harm the tree?
No, it doesn't harm the tree because it's putting a small hole in the tree, but within a year, that hole, it's always healing, but it's not very long down the line, a couple of years, that you have to look at that tree pretty closely to figure out where to put a hole, that you don't put one where you already put it. So it heals quite quickly.
Here's another way of looking at it. It's basically like a doctor is checking out your blood. So he pokes a needle into your skin, and he takes out a piece of your blood and he checks it out, makes sure you're all healthy and everything. That's somewhat what we're doing to these trees. We're actually putting a hole into the tree, and we're taking some of the sap, which is the bloodline of the tree, and then we are boiling it down. When we take it out, the skin heals itself. But here's something else that a lot of people don't understand, is that, believe it or not, in many cases we may be prolonging the life of that tree by taking out the sap during this time.
How so?
Well, how do I explain this? In ancient days, they used to believe, of course we know this better now, but they used to believe that when they will take the blood out of a person to purify, to take out the disease. It's similar in that kind of a case. When the bloodline is going through the tree, or the sap, when you take some of it out, it's purifying what's inside that tree.
Excellent. Earlier you mentioned that ideal conditions would be cold nights, warm days, which is definitely something we've been having lately. How much of a factor is the weather and the temperature?
That is so interesting. For those of you who are fishermen or fisher ladies, you've heard the old sayings. Well, there is a saying for maple sugaring. The sap that runs from the east wind, if there's an east wind that day, it'll run the least. If it's from the west, it'll run the best. If it's from the north, it'll be pours forth, not bad. And if it's from the south, it's like a drought. It doesn't run. So it's not just the temperature, it's the day and where the wind is. Barometric pressure, when we're sugaring in the sugar house, it'll change how quickly it boils from the day to the night. There's a lot of factors.
That is very interesting. I would have no idea that there were so many other factors that go into getting the sap from the tree. So far this, I guess you could call it winter. It's supposed to be 60 degrees this Wednesday, so what do I know? How has it really helped or hurt production?
Well, we have tapped. Many of the sugar makers up here are ready to go. With the lines, you're able to tap earlier to get the first run. And the answer always to the question of sugaring is we'll let you know when it's all over.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, basically.
Because it's like farming, it's that process. We do not know. We can't guess the weather. You can try to guess it, but if the wind is wrong, things change. We live in the Adirondacks. It can be raining on this side of the mountain and nice on the other side. And the same thing with the temperature. Sometimes we'll listen to the radio or we'll look on the internet. We will see the temperature, but the temperature won't be just what they said. So it's a guessing game, and we do the very best we can. The main thing is to be ready.
And and like we've said earlier, it's not an exact science. Even if the weather seems to be perfect for the sap to flow, sometimes the sap decides not to flow. Sometimes when the weather seems like it's not perfect for sap to flow, well, guess what? The sap may be flowing like a river. Mm-hmm. Sometimes the trees have a mind of their own.
So you could call it like one of the first Adirondack arts. You could call it. Now I remember talking to Peter about the different ambers, and he said it's almost a crapshoot on what kind of amber you get. I mean, you can try and affect it by how hot you're going or how long you're boiling, but he said in the end it's kind of a gamble on what you get.
Okay, the different types. Usually at the very beginning of the year, after you've tapped and you have your first runs, usually that's when you get your fancy, the nice looking stuff. But it doesn't necessarily have a strong taste yet. Some people like that. Then as time goes on, then you start getting your darker amber. And at the end of the season, that's when you get the stuff that you and I like. That's the stuff that they used to, put on the ice cream. Mm-hmm. It's a real dark. And of course you've got to realize your trees are getting closer to budding. When they bud, though, then it doesn't taste good at all. And so all this is affecting it. All these different things are affecting it. And it does get stronger as time goes on. And the more people enjoy maple syrup, they like the darker a little bit more, the dark amber better.
I love that good, rich flavor. Now, Aaron might know this. What is this dessert called when you put the maple syrup on the snow?
Jack wax?
Jack wax. I saw a thing on TV where they had a whole restaurant, and that's all they did. They just had like a big trough full of snow, mm-hmm. and then you would spread the maple syrup, and then you took a stick and you rolled it to get the jack wax, and you'd eat it right there. I was like, that's an interesting concept.
That's good too.
That's very good. And of course, Adirondack snow, especially fresh snow, it's the best snow for jack wax. There's something about the Adirondack air and how it gives it its own flavor. And a lot of people don't realize this, but they're like, well, why does different maple syrup taste differently from different locations or from different sugar bushes? It's the soil, the air, the environment in the sugar house. Everything has an effect on that taste of maple syrup.
So even if I had, we'll say, maple syrup from the Weavers, and then I had maple syrup from the McCombs, there could be quite a difference in taste.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Now, one of the big reasons that we're here tonight is Maplefest. That will be March 17th. And my question to you is, what is Maplefest?
Maplefest, the 4th of July Parade Committee wanted to have a pancake breakfast, and they came up with this idea of the Maplefest. And so now there are different activities that are going to happen on that Saturday that people can get involved in. And do you want a list of?
I would like a list of what is going on.
Well, first at 8 a.m. to 11 a.m., the parade committee is going to have a pancake breakfast at the inn. And they'll be asking for donations when people buy the breakfasts. The Historical Society is going to have a craft fair at the library from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m.
That's the Lake Pleasant Town Library.
Yes, the Lake Pleasant Town Library, I'm sorry. From 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. or later, Aaron is going to be making maple sugar the 18th century way?
Yeah, the 18th century, early 19th century process of doing it outdoors without any electricity.
The Oak Mountain.
Oh yeah, that'll be at our Weaver Sugar Bush right in front of the sugar house. I'll be doing that, and I'll be dressed up in early 19th century outfit, and I'll be trying my best to present to people who stop by on how it was done by the first settlers of Lake Pleasant and Wells.
The Oak Mountain is going to have a band and pond skimming that day. Also in the afternoon, there's going to be Irish bowling on Marion Avenue. At night, I know that the Inn and the Oxbow Inn are both going to have Irish corned beef dinners. And I believe that Gary, ADK Karaoke will be, you're going to be at the Inn at 9 p.m.?
That is correct.
Great.
Nice little plug into this interview.
Also, we're going to have a pamphlet, and on the pamphlet, it's going to be a map to show these different areas. And we plus are going to have the history of 3 of the sugar bushes here, the McCombs, Fran Gramlichs, and the Weavers, and where you can go, and a map to show where you can go to those sugar bushes if you would like to check them out and see what's going on. Also, that weekend with the McCombs, they're part of the New York State maple sugaring weekend, and so that works out great. But the pamphlet will have the schedule and whatever, and you can get that pamphlet at the chambers, or we'll also have it at the craft fair at the library.
You know, that's what's so cool about Lake Pleasant Speculator. All the sugar houses operations here, not a single one does it the same way. Right. So you get to see many different ways that the process of boiling sap into maple sugar or syrup is done.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, in essence, we're kind of combining this Maplefest with the fact that it's also St. Patrick's Day.
Well, it happens to have landed on St. Patrick's Day.
Oh, that wasn't planned. It just kind of happened.
No, that just happens that we had.
But it works perfectly.
Said that, but it works great. Yes, it does.
You know, now was this an idea just from the parade committee, or has this been something that's been kind of mulling around for a little bit?
Well, it was basically from them, because they need to raise money for the 4th of July and the fireworks and so forth. And then they came to the Historical Society to see if they would do something. So we're going to do the craft fair, and then other people volunteer to do the Irish bowling and so forth. So it's a community cooperation of doing these different events.
Now, how are local businesses helping with Maplefest?
Well, actually, they're probably promoting it. I mean, it will help their businesses, but in essence,
they were never asked.
They weren't really asked, because they're always constantly asked to give, to festivals or whatever, and we didn't want that to happen this time because they keep being
They're
asked
wonderful.
to do
They
it.
do a lot.
They do a lot for our community, and I know that they are very happy to do so. But in this essence, we decided to stick with the nonprofit organizations.
Yep.
But yeah, I mean, this is going to help them a lot as well, bringing people up.
Yep.
Now, how has the overall community reception been to this idea?
It seems to be quite high. Yeah.
Well, it's part of our heritage, and a lot of people up here who have lived here for years consider maple sugaring part of our culture. And for us to expand it and to present it to people outside our community is very much of a pride situation for us to do. So yeah, there's a lot of positive feedback behind this. Not just by the earlier families, but newer families in the community who will really want to know more about the whole process. And even I found out a lot of newer families in our community wish to do it as a hobby themselves. And they really want to, we want to find a connection in the atmosphere of this community. So this has been a very positive.
And the sugar houses are usually open to anybody who wants to come and visit them And this just happens to be a special day that you actually can. Though you can go visit them anytime, but this would be, just a special day to do it.
And this is a great way for people in the community to actually know where they are located.
Yeah.
Because you'll be surprised. There's even people in our own community that's like, what? Where's this? What's this? Well, this is an opportunity for even the local people to know, oh, I didn't realize this was here, or I didn't realize there was a sugar bush in this location.
And I think they'll be surprised at Fran Gramlich. I mean, he's a very small, personal, but it'll be nice to see his small sugar shack compared to McCombs and Weavers, And, they're all, as you said before, they're all different.
Yeah, and I know Mr. Grimm is a great guy.
Sure
Yeah.
is.
Yeah.
Yes.
The only reason I know where yours was because that's where he parks his car. There it is.
Yeah.
Just a funny joke to let you know. If you're traveling down the road and you happen to see a building and it looks like it's on fire, it might not be.
With
So
the
we have
smoke
more
coming
than
out.
we have more than enough times had calls. The sheriff department, they pretty well know what's going on now. They'll say, "Where were you?" "Oh, don't worry about it. That's just steam coming out of the top."
Yeah.
So we've had people run right up to the door and open it, thinking that there was a fire, and then it's like, "Oh." So just beware.
For people who are listening that don't understand what we're talking about, a sugar house has an opening on the top of the roof where we allow what's being evaporated from the sap to flow into the air outside. And when you go by, it does look like the sugar house is on fire. and the reality is, it's like, no, come on in. We're boiling maple sap into maple syrup. But yeah, it is. Every year we always expect a phone call or something.
Yep, I do notice that driving down the road to see the big puffs of
Yes.
steam and the like. And visiting your sugar shack before, it is very interesting to see the family dynamic. Like I mentioned before, your brother Peter and your mother was there, Aaron was there, and
Yep.
just to see one family come together and do this, and even people that are in your family don't live around here come up to help
Yes.
on the weekends when they
Absolutely.
can. It's just a marvelous experience.
Even our grandchildren
Yes.
have helped out when they've been around. And they would be the 5th generation to work that sugar bush.
Yes, we're very blessed, very, very blessed, and we have. There was 5 of us boys, and there's still a couple of us around. My brother Andy's there too, and my cousin Wayne's there a lot, and we have a great time. We really do, and it is a special time, and we love having people come by and visit us.
Excellent. Any last thoughts before we start wrapping up?
Well, I would just encourage people to join this Maplefest, And if somebody wants to sell something, just contact me, Ann Weaver, to get a registration to be part of the craft fair. But, support the 4th of July parade committee with their pancake breakfast and enjoy taking the tour of the sugar bushes. It's going to be a great day. I mean, if you like Irish bowling, set up a team. I think it has to be a team of 4 or 5. But the rules you can get that at the
Chamber
chambers.
of Commerce.
I feel like Neil will probably sucker me into playing.
Knowing him, yes.
Yeah. Mr. Irishman himself.
Sure.
Yes, well, they'll be using his balls and everything, his Irish bowling balls and stuff.
Excellent.
Yeah, that's an interesting history right there about that game.
Yeah, well, I can't wait for the pancake breakfast. Hopefully, I'll get some Weaver syrup to put on my pancakes. Oh, sounds very good. So yeah, everybody stop down at the Lake Pleasant Library and to the various stops for more information. Of course, you can go to the Chamber of Commerce, which is located at the Four Corners at the Lane Emporium. Declan Radio will be at the various events, broadcasting and talking to people about the various things they are doing. So thank you guys for
Well, thank you.
coming
Thank you.
out. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.